So, working on this Volkswagen Crafter with an intermittent, well, slightly intermittent problem. We've got a slightly intermittent problem of long crank, and it does it sometimes and not others. Now, it's kind of a little bit of a wager going on because I hope I'm right and he's wrong, but the guy who works for me, we're kind of placing bets on different things. So I think it's something to do with oil pressure and the variable cam. I think it's got one. I haven't even looked at this point. I'm just trying to disprove him wrong. Because it's fun like that. So what we've got is, all this is loose at the minute, but if you can see me probing there, that's on the high pressure fuel. He thinks that what's happening is, because he had one of these where the injector, one of the injectors was leaking off so badly, but only occasionally, that it would crank forever before it'd start. So we've got the Autel Max Assist in there, and we've got a scope lead attached to it, and then we come inside here. Now, I'll be honest, I've had this tablet about a year, maybe 8 months. The scope is something I've always wanted to have a play with, but I'm not very familiar with it, so it's a little bit of a learning curve, which is annoying because it did its long crank, and yeah, it did its long crank, and then I had to rearrange everything because I got too much time on the screen. So if you're not aware, on these, obviously you've got, this is an oscilloscope, you've got time, which is the divisions this way, and then you've got a range in voltage or ampage or however you set it up and down in your scale. So, as we can see there, 1.9 seconds was how long it took between me cranking at the beginning, which was here, the engine firing, which was here. So it took 1.9 seconds to build fuel pressure. It's not great. To be honest, I would prefer a second, but 1.9 is acceptable. Now, as I say, that wasn't a long crank, but we now know that it's 1.9 seconds for an average crank, and I mean it's perfectly reasonable. So what we're going to do, I'm going to run this scope again. Let's exit the scales, and we're going to key on, and we're going to do this again. And we're going to see if we can capture it on camera. Boom! There's the money shot. There is the money shot. The fuel pressure got high enough. That is not the reason for this engine long crank. Well, would you look at that? So let's just see. Do apologise for the camera work here. I'm trying to find the buttons on the screen and not screw this up. So it started about there. So we were 2.6 seconds to build fuel pressure, but we continued to crank even once we'd reached fuel pressure. It started about there. Even once fuel pressure was achieved, we continued to crank for 4.8 seconds. So yes, it did take longer that time to achieve fuel pressure, but it still took 4 seconds after the fuel rail pressure had got up in order for it to start. Obviously there is a spike in the fuel rail pressure here, and obviously it gets more frequent, but that's to do with the fact that obviously the engine starts and it runs. So that says to me, that is not the reason for it. Now, I'm going to do this again. Hope it does it, because I would like to get it on camera, because there is something it does do when it does that, which I do find interesting. Not going to do it now. Nope, not going to do it. I'm going to let it run for a second just to charge the battery up. So when it does that, You see that cranked? So that wasn't particularly long, that one. That was 3.77. But it achieved enough fuel pressure there. Probably a bit before that, if we're honest. Yet again, 2 seconds. Focus. So even once it has achieved fuel pressure, we are taking longer to start. Now, the interesting thing I did note, and it has done it a couple of times, but only a couple of times, the light on the dashboard for the oil pressure warning flashes goes away after maybe 3 or 4 seconds of it running, but sometimes on a long crank we do get an oil pressure light on the dashboard. So is 2 seconds a long crank? I wouldn't have said it was excessive. I do think the starter motor on this is worn. It does first thing in the morning sometimes when you turn the key. You put the key in, turn it, and the starter engages and then it clicks, but it doesn't actually turn. So I think it has got a faulty starter, which won't help our cranking at all. But as much as that won't help our cranking, and is a problem, and it probably does want a starter motor in it, it's not the reason it's doing this. So, as we can see, now this is quite cool. This is why I love oscilloscopes, and I love to play with them more, but it's getting time. Nice steady line. Up goes the fuel pressure. And if you wanted to scale that there is a section in here, but you could scale that to an actual pressure rating, so that this would be pressure as opposed to voltage. But for our purposes, it's ample for what we're doing. So I am going to set this to 2 volts per division, and we are going to do this again. I apologise, that light is really getting you. So's the dirty fingerprints on the tablet. I'm going to wait till it gets to the next screen. And 3. See, that time, bang on. I'm being that YouTube guy with the camera that's all over the place. It's awfully inconvenient. Oh, you can move that. Told you it's a learning curve. So it started somewhere around there. See, 2.7 seconds. So I'm going to say 2 seconds is about an average crank for it. Like I said, might start faster with a good starter, with a slightly better starter motor. Do agree with that. The vehicle does sit around a lot as well, so there could be a lot of corrosion on the battery terminals and bits and pieces, which could cause other issues. So, oh, and bear in mind with this vehicle, they said the driver put £10 worth of petrol in it by mistake. I've emptied the petrol out. The customer doesn't think it's a problem, because we used to do this with old engines, you know, years ago. We used to put petrol in fuel to stop it gelling. Modern fuels don't gel like old fuels used to, and high pressure fuel systems designed for diesel need all the lubricant they can get. And yes, with some 2-stroke oil you might get away with it, but I wouldn't run petrol. If you've misfueled your car, take it out, because if in 3 weeks time or 3 months time your high pressure system grenades itself because you didn't, you are going to regret it. Right, so I digressed. We are going to say that 2 to 3 seconds is an average crank for this vehicle. Ish. Problem is I kind of need to leave it 5 minutes now. Might leave it 5 minutes and then try again. But then saying that, because the more I do this, the less it seems to be a problem, and the less I seem to get this long crank. See, straight away, it needs leaving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down for now. I'm going to leave it and then come back to it and try again and see if we can get it to act up. Normally if I leave it for about 15-20 minutes it will. I might clean my screen as well so that you guys can see what's going on properly. But yeah, I don't think it is a high pressure fuel problem. I think we are getting to fuel pressure plenty fast enough. And we are actually looking at an oil pressure issue. Now, while we're waiting, we could have a quick look. So, on the back of the older Volkswagens, and I don't know if this is the right era for it, there was a variable, can I even see down there with that? Yeah, it's got pipes and everything in the way. VGR cooler there. Yes, on the older TDIs they had some of them had variable valve timing, and if it's got variable valve timing, there was a problem. Diagnosed, Dan highlighted it, to be honest, where the variable valve timing, the oil pressure would leak out of them, and then they wouldn't lock, and then they'd allow the timing to jump all over the place, and until they built oil pressure for the timing to come back to where it should be, the engine wouldn't start, and it caused a long crank. Generally though, that only caused a long crank first thing in the morning, so I'm not sure. But then this does only tend to do that long crank when it's cold, and when it's not been ran, and it also only seems to throw that oil light when it does that too. I will try and get it on video. This one's long enough for now. It gives you an idea of what I'm trying to do. Thanks for watching.